Okay, here we go. I want to go a little deeper dive into our 8 orders of being, this map of complexity. And it's important that you really be able to understand what this map's about. So what we're trying to do here is to make the very best decisions that we can make, which means we have to be as close to reality as we can possibly get, which means that we have to have maps that explain reality in as much detail as we need to understand what's happening. For most of what we do in life, a simple map is fine because we've used these maps before. We understand how this is how I tie my shoe, this is how I button my shirt, this is how I drive the car. These are things that have become simple over time with practice because we know that this will create that. And so we can reliably show up in a way that's going to do what we need done. And it doesn't mean burning a lot of mental calories trying to figure things out. But from time to time, we come across problems that we can't resolve. And we may say about this is an intractable problem. No, it's just one that's not soluble. We can't solve this problem with the maps that we're currently using. We're going to have maps that take into account more of what's actually going on. All right, so what I'm offering you here is a map, the 8 orders of being, that is very robust insofar as it correlates very closely with lots and lots of developmental maps. There are literally hundreds of developmental maps that map essentially this same process of development. But in addition to the development, there's also making some key distinctions, which not all of these developmental maps take into account. So there's an added layer, and also these 4 different dimensions. So this is a map that is validated insofar as it correlates closely with other developmental maps. And it not only pulls together the developmental processes, but also the distinctions and the dimensions that help us to see with the greatest possible complexity and still being simple enough that we can actually use it. But it's not that simple. So what I want to do is kind of walk us through this and look at how it is that this map, which is ultimately a map of everything, any complex adaptive system, is going to arise at all of these 8 orders of being. But primarily what we're going to focus on as a way of learning about this is we're going to look at the complex adaptive system that is me, is you, is the human experience of developing consciousness. That there's this process by which we become more and more conscious. And so we're going to use this map and kind of hold this map together with the development of our own consciousness to see how does this work, recognizing that once we have the map for this system, our own consciousness, we can then apply it to other systems and look for dynamics that are going on there as well, or not going on there, which may be why it is that system has a problem. Okay? So this is the more expansive map of the orders of self, blown up a little bit here. So I'm gonna take this, and just for the purposes of being able to talk about these things, focus in just on these essential pieces. Okay? So they start down here, starting down here at beige. We don't have any real consciousness yet, where this is at least before we have a sense of ourselves as being separate. We probably do have some level of consciousness way back even to very early stages in our development in our mother's womb. But we mostly don't have access to that, and we certainly don't have a sense of ourselves as separate from the context in which we are. So at first order, we're born, and now we have experiences that we experience as our experience. This is my experience. I'm hungry, I'm tired, I'm giddy, I'm ticklish, I'm whatever I am in the moment that's what I'm conscious of. That's where my consciousness lands. At some point, I begin to discover that in my relationship with the world around me, there are choices that I can make that change my experience. I discover that when I bite down on my teething ring, it makes my teeth stop hurting as much. When I bite down on my thumb, it makes my thumb hurt. So I learn that there is a distinction between that which is me and that which is not me, and that there are things that I can do which will change my experience. So if I'm hungry, I can eat. If I'm tired, I can sleep. If I'm not in the part of town I want to be, I can jump in my car and drive someplace. There are choices that I can make that will transform my own experience in a way that makes my experience more of what I want it to be. Okay, that's second order. And we spend pretty much most of our time until we're through grade school working on being able to master second order things. How do I cross the street looking both ways? How do I find my way home? How do I remember to call my mom when I get to my friend's house? What are those various things that I learned how to do as a kid, so that I can remember when I was in sixth grade, I kind of figured out, I've got it. I've mastered what it takes to be in this world. And then, of course, adolescence hits. And now it really matters to me whether or not I'm wearing the shoes that the cool kids wear, or I've dressed the right way, or am I showing up in a way that meets the approval of others. This is not to say that I didn't before I got into junior high, that I didn't care about what other people thought of me. All throughout my life, I want to please my parents, right? But that's not the primary focus of the development of my consciousness. Now we get into junior high school, we get into adolescence, and now what we're primarily focused on is our social life, and how do we get along with others, and how do we develop relationships with others. And so, we see kids today who are absolutely obsessed with whatever's going on their phone. They can hardly pay attention in class, because what matters in school is they're my friends. Has nothing to do with what the teacher is saying. So we get to a place where we, feel like we've figured out how to negotiate at third order, at this interpersonal realm, how to do things here. I've figured out how it is to be Susie's boyfriend. And I know that Susie wants me to call her every night because she dumped the last guy that she dated because he wasn't attentive enough to her. And I like playing soccer, and I want to be in the game on Saturday, but I can't play if I don't show up for practice this afternoon, because the coach won't play the guys who don't show up for practice. But I've also got an American history test tomorrow, and so I've got to study for that tonight. But I've also got to shift at Burger Doodle because I'm raising money to save up for a car, because in a few years when I'm 16, I want to be able to buy my own car. So I've got all of these demands at third order that telling me this is who it is that I'm expected to be. And what am I going to do? How am I going to deal with it? And I might just say, to hell with it. I'll blow off my shift at Burger Doodle and I'll hang out with Susie and she'll be happy with me. And, so I won't do very well on the test tomorrow, but whatever, Or I will call up my boss at Burger Doodle and I'll say, hey, I'm not going to be able to make it. I'm really sorry, but can you get somebody to cover my shift? And I go to soccer practice, and then I go to the library where I'm going to study for the test tomorrow. Because at fourth order, I get to decide who it is that I'm going to be. And I get to decide how it is that I'm going to negotiate the expectations that people have of me at third order. It doesn't mean I'm ignoring what's going on at third order. It means I'm taking into account what's at third order and deciding how it is that I'm going to be. Now, it may be that the demands of third order are just so great that I'm going to just blow it off. I may have a job where my boss just pisses me off, so I'm going to go get drunk. I'm going to go back to a second order way of changing my experience so that I don't have to deal with the demands of third order. So the question is, am I going to address the demands of third order and use them to move me up to fourth, or am I going to blow them off and move back to second? So if I choose to be at fourth order, now I'm deciding who it is that I'm going to be. How do I want to show up in the world? Now, this is a relatively new development for folks in the developed world, is having to manage fourth order. My grandpa didn't really have to do that. He knew how to do what he was a wood pattern maker for Maytag, and he was really good at it. He had some really good second order skills at being able to take wood and make any shape they wanted out of it. He would get direction from third order. Here's what they want me to do, and then he would fulfill that in his work. And he had certain obligations at third order. He had to pay his bills, and he had to, be home for dinner with my Grammy, and the stuff that he had to do. But he didn't have to figure out who he was going to be. My kids today are now doing jobs that are not going to exist by the time they retire. We have to be constructed at fourth order. And one of the sources for this map is a guy by the name of Robert Keegan, who is a professor at Harvard in adult learning. And in the 90s, he did some very extensive research on what are the levels of cognitive development for people. He wrote a book called In Over Our Heads, in which he suggests that the problem that we have with our teenagers is not the way they behave, but the way that they think. It's the cognitive maps that they need to have to be able to make sense of the world. So we need to help them think better, not just do. They will automatically do better if they think better. And part of his research discovered that most people are struggling to be able to construct their lives at solving fourth order kinds of problems. As I said, we're at all other orders all the time. The question is, at the moment, as I'm making sense of the world, how complex are the maps that I'm using? And am I using a first, second, third, fourth order map to be able to make sense of things? How do I make meaning of the world? Now, he had discovered that most people were struggling now to be, as adults, struggling to be at fourth order. But he also discovered that people reliably grow through these stages. They will naturally move up. And because a lot of the subjects that he was looking at were students at Harvard, they were getting a lot of stimulus to grow their mental ability to form more cognitive maps. But one of the things clearly that they verified was that we only move in one direction. We only move towards complexity. When people have established a level of complexity and then they revert to an earlier map, it's because they are in some sense stressed or traumatized. So there's this natural progression, this health, and then there's this regression, this pathological, this illness-born moving backwards into lower stages. Beyond fourth order, it gets a little bit harder to validate because there are so few people that have moved beyond fourth order. But more and more, we're seeing folks who are able to be conscious of themselves at fifth order. Now, fifth order, you recall, is the intrapersonal. Now I'm paying attention to what's going on inside of me. What are my inner thoughts, feelings, wishes, the inner conflicts that I'm having? I want to tell my boss off, but I want to keep my job. Now, I can be at second order and have that conflict. The question is, am I aware of that conflict? Do I become conscious of it? And I have to become conscious of it to be able to address it. When we are sufficiently aware at fifth order that we can say, oh, well, here's a way of being that can take into account these various polarized attitudes, parts, perspectives that I'm carrying with me. And so I've got a way of thinking, a way of understanding the situation, and a way of behaving that will, in fact, take into account the complexity of this situation. That's sixth order. And you'll notice here we've got this darker line here. That line is because that's a movement to second tier. And I mentioned that there are a number of different maps for understanding this development. And one of the things they share in common is this recognition that there's this point at which we're not in Kansas anymore. There's a clear shift as we move into second tier or sixth order or teal or however people talk about this. because at this level, we are able to look back at all of the earlier levels and say, oh, well, of course. Yeah, we can see. We have to move through each of these. Each one builds on the one before it. We don't, at third order, get rid of first order. We still have to know what's actually going on. We still have to be able to solve problems at second order. But at third order, we're aware of what others want us to do. And at fourth order, we're clear about who we are in relationship to others. And at fifth order, we discover our inner tensions and conflicts and diversity and the multitude of aspects of our being. So that at sixth order, we're at a place where we can hold it all together. And from that perspective, now we can see things with a depth, with a wisdom that we didn't have before. But we recognize that not everybody has the privilege of being able to see from this perspective. And as a consequence, they're slogging along at second, third order and struggling with those problems. And that the suffering that comes from that, our heart breaks open for people because it's so hard. And we care about them, not because, like at third order, that's the good thing to do. That's kind of what nice people do. It's because we genuinely feel connected to others. We're a part of them. And we enter into this transpersonal awareness of the interconnectedness of being. Everything is a part of everything else. We are a part of everything else. And the fact that I am who I am is an accident of my existence. I just happened to be this. I didn't earn this. So it's not like I deserve to be enlightened. And so this is the point at which, in Eastern traditions, of the Bodhisattva, the one who has reached a level of enlightenment and goes back into the world in order to help others experience their own enlightenment. That's what I want us to be doing, is to be able to get to a place where we can see complexity clearly enough. We have enough of a handle on it, we feel familiar with it, that then we can go back and find where people are and help them discover what's the next step, what's the next thing that I'm going to need to do to be able to move up this ladder. One of the things that's really scaring me, there was this thing just this morning about the children of ISIS fighters growing up in a world which is so chaotic that they are going to become ISIS fighters. That's the fear. They don't have enough stability. There's so much trauma that they're going to be stuck out of their trauma at second order. And at second order, justice is revenge. At third order, justice is following the law. At fourth order, justice is being fair, is everybody getting something of what they need. And at fifth order, it is actually structuring society in such a way that every part of society is equally valued and has the resources that it needs. So that at sixth order, we are all together in a society in which we support each other. All right, so I hope this kind of whets your interest and that you spend some time with these maps and live into them. So if I reference fifth order, you know what it is that I'm talking about, and we can have a conversation about how we experience life through the lens of these various orders, and how we make the choices in our life that help us to grow up to higher and higher levels of complexity, like levels of consciousness, and being able to use that complexity to solve the problems of living for ourselves and for each other. All right, take care.